Yes, sir.
Could you also tell us about Bonanza?
Discuss Bonanza.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
There should be another.
Let me get there.
No. When I first started with Bonanza, it was a failing proposition. It was the first year. And I happened to get a script called The Tax Collector. And it was their first comedy, and it was a delightful script. Written by Arnold Bellegarde, an old buddy of mine, and it was a good one. And we cast it just perfect with a little Firestone actor, Eddie Firestone, fine actor. It had some funny business in it, and I added a hell of a lot. And I was on the strength of that they picked up the first year.
Yes.
And I stayed with them for years and years, and finally they started to disintegrate. The guys started to disintegrate. The one guy left, what was his name?
Pernell Roberts.
Who?
Pernell Roberts.
Pernell Roberts. He was probably the best actor of the bunch of them. Mike Landon, I gave him his first job in pictures. I picked him up out of the Players Ring. I went to see Mike Erickson, who was a very good friend of mine, in Tea and Sympathy. And I picked the whole cast up. I was making the television shows with Rex Allen. And Mike was playing the young boy in Tea and Sympathy. And I don't know, I made about 7 or 8 of them a year for years and got along with them fine. And suddenly they brought in a new man. And these guys, boy, they pulled their head at this, and I had nothing to do with it, really. And we were going to be on location, Red Rock Canyon, and I came to the tag where the new man, I can't think of his name. Maybe some of you remember.
David Canary?
David Canary?
David Canary?
David Canary, fine man, young actor, yeah. But they just decided that they were a mother, father, brothers team, and they were going to stay that way, and nobody was going to cut into him any way possible. They made his life miserable, and I said, look, I took him aside and I said, don't let him get you down. Hang in there, Buster, I'm on your side. So they refused to shoot on location the end of the picture. They said, where he solves the problem rather than the cart race. So we went home. After I told all of them off, all except Dan Locker, Dan was always a dog. And that was my last picture. I got into a beef with NBC. The night we got, the next day we shot, and I shot till 8 o'clock at night. We still hadn't shot the tag of the picture that they refused to do. So they asked me to come in after I finished work. This is 9 o'clock at night, and I've been up since 5 o'clock in the morning. And here's all these executives sitting there who I knew, most of them. And I listened to all this argument and stuff. Not one of them said a word. They're waiting for Dave Dortor, God love him. And the writer, who's my best friend, I can't think of his name, Tommy Thompson, to figure it out for him. Well, we can't figure it out. And finally, I got up and I said, I've had it with you guys. I'm going to go home. And the head of programming at NBC, his name was Jerry something or other. I've known him for years. He'd been an accountant or something in the Republic when I was there. I told him, I said, I used to buy my liquor from him. I said, you were a lousy liquor salesman and you're a worse executive to buy. And I said, oh, they blackballed me and I didn't work in the picture business for a year. Stories of the Century with what the hell was his name? Yeah, good friend, nice guy. And we were making a series called Walking Marietta. So we cast the parts. We cast Jack, good-looking Jack, somebody in the part of Joaquin. We cast another little Mexican girl that we worked with before on the part of one of the girls. And then there was a guy that came in, and he was to play Three-Finger Jack. And he had a big scar on his face, and I had seen him. He played the head in Dark of the Moon on Broadway, and I had happened to catch the Broadway show of Dark of the Moon, which I loved. So when he left, Eddie White said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Wow, it's using me. Great." So the first morning, we were shooting those pictures in 2.5 days each. We had shot one day on the picture. We were going out to Bonanza the next day, and it rained. So we put the cover set. But the cover set was in the cave on another picture, on the Walking Marietta picture. So they got all the actors in and everything, called the trucks back in, and I went on the set with Buddy Thackeray to light the cave set. So I told the assistant, I said, "Go get the actors out of makeup and bring them down here, and so we can get a rehearsal, so we can get going on this thing," because it couldn't waste any time on those little things, say. So we got a little scene between Joaquin and this little Mexican girl around the campfire in the cave, and Three-Finger Jack comes in. So I told him, I said, "Now look, John," I can't remember his last name, but I said, "Now look, John, when you come in, you stand there by that deal, and I'll wave you in with a finger like this, but when we make it, there will be a light out there, called a cue light. And when that light comes on, you come in. But now we haven't got the light out there, so I'll just go like this." So these two people played a little scene. Jack with I didn't know him, thinking difference. But they played a little scene, I waved, and here comes Jack. He said, "Joaquin never guessed what I going down today." Well, Mike Thackeray looked at me, and I looked at him, and Mike says, "Oh, well, before the picture was over, he hit Jim Davis on the head with a pistol. I said, "Look, this Jim that much, he was as clumsy as he was otherwise." But I said, "Just miss Jim this far." Well, he hit Jim on the head for about 10 stitches on his head. And when we got finished, I said, "Well, you're finished." And he came up to me and he said, "Mr. Whitney, I want to thank you very much. It's been a great experience for me." And I said, "For you." Now comes the rest of the story. I have a brother-in-law named Bert Clark who's producing the Annie Oakley series. I got a call. The call says, "Sonny boy, there's an actor just left here that says you used." His name is John something, brother. How was he? I said, "Bert, for God's sake, use him. It'll be an experience you'll never forget." He said, "Thanks a lot." 2 days later, I get another call. He says, "You heard no good."
What do you remember about directing Wild Wild West? That was a Universal serial?
There's the rock pond.
Oh, I beg your pardon, this can't be serious. Thank you for your evaluation.
Did you elaborate?
I made the first two that were on the air. They made a pilot and it was stunk. So I made the first two that was on the air. After I finished the first two, Mr. Conrad and I didn't get along very well. The last day of the picture, he thought he was a great stuntman. He wanted to jump off of a 10-foot wall. Now this is a leading man. And he told me he was gonna. I said, well, you can jump off, but you jump off on the other side, Buster, where I can't see you because the stuntman's coming off there. Stuntman in the business. So anyway, the last day of the picture, he's gonna run through this explosion, and there's we're on an interior, and there's a wooden fence. It was about 6 feet tall. So he said to the special effects man, who incidentally was the next Marine who I'd known many years, he says, blow it right under me. And he said, for God's sakes, Bob, you know I can't blow it right under you. What do you want to do? He said, I got to be working this business soon. I said, give me the button. So he handed me the button. I said, roll, okay, Bob, take off. And I did it just perfect. I caught him on the upbeat. He went up in the air, turned over once, rolled up against the deal, and I walked up to him and said, he looked up at me and I said, well, by God, I didn't kill you, did I? And he said, no, but you sure blew me off my lips. Now, he's a little short guy and wears lips about this tall. So, yes, I remember. The next, they gave me another script and I told the producer, you can take it, you know what you can do with it. I never went back there again. I did. That's and the microphone's me.
Okay, on to the questions. Little side thing, yes.
Mr. Whitney, how did they stage dog fight scenes? Like in the spoilers of the planes, where a couple of dogs fighting, so that they didn't hurt each other?
Well, I'll tell you about that too. Earl Johnson, probably a real good personal friend of mine, top dog trainer. He trained the original Lassie. He trained the little dog that followed the little girl up the yellow brick road. He trained Asta, the little dog in Tin Man series. And Earl was the nicest, gentlest person, and that dog trainer he was. When it came time, I had a crazy idea about a dog story. Did Sloan write that story about the dog? I think he did. And we yacked about it and everything. He said, I don't know if we can do this or not. And I said, let's try, what the heck. And he said, you get tired of doing certain things. So I asked Roy, I said, Roy, how'd you like to have a dog in your series? Oh man, he says, can we call him Bullet? And I thought of Earl Johnson. If you paid Earl Johnson, you could have called the dog anything you wanted, believe me. So in that picture, we got this dog fight. You tape the dog's mouths. You don't use the real dog, you use the double dogs. You tape their mouths shut so they can't bite. And you put the sound effects in later. Well, the first morning, I raised dogs all my life. I had a kennel, and I've trained them. Earl taught me how to train them. I have trained CD, CDX, utility dogs, all kind of dogs that you've ever dreamed of. And we made this, you don't rehearse things like that. During the scene, one of the tapes broke on one of the dogs. Well, Earl and Earl's assistant and myself separated these dogs, and we all went to have a bite cauterized. Man, wait, he chewed on us, that son of a gun, he chewed on, or really chewed on me. So we taped them up and tried it again. The dogs' mouths are taped when we fight. And there was an SPCA man there that watches you like a hawk. Usually, you say to him just before you're shooting something like that, don't you have to go to the bathroom? And he looks at you and he says, no, I don't. I said, well, you've got to have to go to the bathroom, don't you? Think about it a minute. Don't you have to go? Funny, you can talk him into thinking he has to go to the bathroom. So then the minute he leaves, you say, roll. But no, the dogs were fighting here. You can't think that. You can't put a man in a dog, you can put a guy in a monkey suit. Corey made a hell of a monkey. As a matter of fact, he looked more like a monkey without the suit.
Frank, I know it's hard to pick.
Good to see you here in this desolated place.
Well, it's good to see you. One thing about the description, you couldn't miss it. First trestle on the right.
All right.
We're going to talk here?
Yeah, why don't we go over there? It's a
good,
nice
Danny.
place, and talk a little bit about Roy and Dale and the 27 pictures you made with them.
Cut! That does it, boys. You okay? Sure, sure. Well, that's another picture in the bag. When are you leaving? Right away.
Bill, why are Roy and Dale so magical?
Why are they so magical? Well, I have my own theory about the two of them. Of course, Dale is easy to explain. She's pretty, she's sweet, she's nice, she's a good actress, she could sing, she had everything. She should have been a much bigger star than she was. Roy, and I classify Gene and Roy, Gene Autry, the same way. The average American woman is married to a hard-working man. They come home, they're sweaty, they're dirty, their hands aren't clean. And when they go to see these pictures, here's a fellow that always looks like he just stepped out of a bandbox, whether he's been fighting in the mud or anything. And I think basically what I'm talking about, you'll understand, that they compared their husbands to Roy and said, why can't they be like that?
In your pictures, and also some of the others, there is a strange mixture of the Wild West. People riding on horses, stagecoach. At the same time, there are also cars there. It's modern 1940s, modern 1950s. Isn't it a little bit strange?
Well, not particularly, because you go out west, even today, where the horses and cattle up in the Colorados and stuff, you'll find the horseback. You'll find the horsemen riding right alongside of the cars and jeeps. But I can tell you one thing, my best friend went with Roy when he produced his television shows. And one day he asked me, he said, what do you think of the shows? And I said, well, I tell you, I don't mind a stagecoach holdup and then a Jeep coming along chasing them. But when you go into that coffee shop of Dale's, there's the latest coffee maker. I said, that kind of startled me.
Now, I remember a story about Trigger that through an accident, I think a reflector fell from a car. You found out that he was really very smart. Can you tell that story?
I'll tell you, we were up on location on the first picture I made at Kernville, and we were on a flat running insert road making a running insert. Now, running insert, you've got the camera on the camera car and the horse is running alongside of it. And we're flying down the road, probably 40, 45 miles an hour, and Roy's leaning over Trigger, and all of a sudden this big iron reflector blew off the camera car. Nobody had safetied it down, and it flew right at Trigger's legs. My heart stopped, and the old horse jumped it. How in the world Roy stayed on, I'll never know. Roy was a good horseman. So we stopped the camera car, and I ran back, and Roy was on the ground feeling his legs, and me too. And I said to Roy, that's one of the greatest horses I've ever seen. And later on, they cried, bring up the old man, when the double horses couldn't do it. By golly, the old man could. And he was 16, 17 years old then. We clocked him at 50 miles an hour.
Rogers, he got out.
Didn't you use that in the Far Frontier?
Well, kind of. I didn't think we would be able to get it because I'm an old jumping horse rider myself. And we tried it with all the double horses, professional double horses. One of my horses, a good horse, and they'd all duck out on that rolling barrel toward it. So I said to Joe Ergo, the stunt man, I said, hey, Joe, I wonder if the old man had jumped this. He said, let's try it. If he don't jump it, he'll get out of the way. If I can hang on. Well, he came down and he shied off a little bit, but he jumped the first one, and then the second one came along, and he was happy. He knew what to do this time.
But the drum was tormented.
You saw Trigger for the last time just before he died, didn't you?
Pretty much so, yeah. I was making a picture of the Sky King, a television show, and we were working at Roy's Ranch in Chatsworth. And somebody told me that Trigger was down in the barn by Roy's house. At lunchtime, I walked down to see him. And it was a hot day, and he was standing way back in the stall, and I leaned on the stall and said, hey, Trig. Put his ears up, and he walked over. It didn't look like the Trigger I knew. And I petted him, and turned and said goodbye to him, walked away, and it wasn't long before he died. But I'm sure I was thrilled that he remembered my voice, because I used to be able to yell, come on, at him, and he'd come. He'd move on at my voice. We worked together so long, they get to know your voice. But it was a sad moment when he died for everybody. Horses don't live like people. So you got to give up something.
Another question, please? Yes, Mr. Majors.
Mr. Whitney, the Ty Zockerson film that you appeared in, you had a very moving tribute to Trigger in that film, which I think everybody enjoyed, but I think you have something you wanted to share about Mr. Ockerson in the film. Is that correct?
Well, okay, I'll tell you this story. What started this was a conversation between the three of us upstairs this morning. And I started to tell the story, and I said, my God, this is going to take an hour to tell, forget it. And now, he brings it up again. It's going to take at least 5 minutes to tell the story. And I think he's crazy, he's thinking it would happen. I get a telephone call from somebody from the Netherlands. His name is Ockerson. And he's doing a memorial on Roy Rogers. And he wants me to be in the picture. And I said, gee, thanks a lot, but I live up in the mountains now, and I don't do anything, and it's gonna, if you want me, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. And he said, how much? And I took a figure off my head, and I think it was $3,000. And he said, well, you know, the Netherlands is a very poor country. Well, that broke me out. It's probably one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And this was being financed by their government. So I said, okay. He said, we'll fly up to where you live. Now, I live in the Mother Lode country in Northern California, where gold was discovered, on the way to Lake Tahoe. So I forgot about it. And then I get a call one day, and he said, he said, we're ready to shoot you, and we're going to come up and shoot you in your own house. So I said, well, that's fine. You come up here, it's very pretty country. So he said, there's 4 or 5 of us, and he said, we're going to fly in. There, we'll be in at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we've got to be through and we've got to be out of here by 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I said, well, if you had took a helicopter, you couldn't be up here and get back to where you want to go. So they said, oh my, but we haven't got any more time. We've been over to Roy Rogers' house. He was at Rogers' place at the time. So I said, okay, well, let's forget it. He said, no. They're both be away. So I said, tell you what, I'll meet you down at the airport in Sacramento. There's a lot of nice places around it that we can shoot. And you can do whatever you want. Ask me some questions and do whatever you want right there. So, Bev and I get in the car and we drive down to Sacramento. And we got there we stopped a couple of places to look at, a couple of parks we knew about, and looked to see if they would be okay for them. There were quite a bit of traffic noise, but I said, well, I wasn't going to make any difference to them. So we picked them up at the airport. I think there were 5 of them. So we sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk over a few things, and Bev suddenly jumps up and says, oh my God, takes off 90 miles an hour. She's back in 2 minutes, and she said the parking ticket's going to cost us $50. So that's the day out. So we take them on a drive. They had rented a car, and we take them on a drive down the Garden Highway, which is along the Sacramento River. And I pointed out a couple of spots that we had picked beforehand that I thought might do them, but they didn't like them. So we drive clear on down to Sacramento into Discovery Park, which is right there by the Capitol. And they didn't like that. So they said there was a spot that we could pick back here. Now they've all got accents, but not that bad accents. So I said, well, okay, you follow me until we get back to where on the highway there, and then you pass me up and then you stop. Well, they stopped at a bridge, a trestle, low trestle, that was about a mile long, and it had been used as a junkyard underneath it. So I looked at Bev and said, I don't know about these guys. So the fellow that is directing the picture is also the star, and he's a little fat guy with a big stomach. So he gets out of the car and he takes a big belt with a belt buckle on it, puts it around him, and he walks up on the track. I'm standing there watching, and the guy gets the camera out, shaped like this, and he gets it out, and they follow him up on top of the truck, and we stand in the middle of the deal. I don't know what I'm doing. So they shoot him for about, at least 35, 40, 50 minutes. Now, anytime a couple of cops' cars come by, they didn't stop. And then a railroad truck came by and stopped. So I walked over, and he said, what are you doing? I said, oh, they're just taking a few pictures. I didn't know one to run us off particularly, which I do. It's a right away. And he said, well, there's a train coming along in a few minutes. Well, be sure they're off the track. I said, I'll get them off the track. So finally, now they've been shooting this fellow looking up and down the track. The director is looking up and down this track. So finally he says, can you drive the car back? Oh, they asked Bev if she would drive down the thing so he could get out. He was going hitchhiking across the United States, they told me eventually. So she drives the car down, he gets out, says thank you to her, and goes on and walks up on the top of the bridge. So now they go back up on the top of the bridge and shoot him for another hour. And I'm standing there, and it's getting dark, and I mean dark. So finally, they said, okay, we're ready to shoot you. So they take me down in the junk pile down below, and they start to ask me questions. They stand me up with, and I was cold to boot. And they asked me these questions, and I noticed one of the reviewers when he said, when Mr. Whitney was talking about Tigger, there were tears in his eyes. I was too cold. So now the train trestle comes along. So they stop this, and the train is coming, and they for 15 minutes they spent shooting the train going across the bridge. So which is okay. So now they finish up with me, and Deb and I go back and get in the car to get warm. And the guy comes over and gets in the back of the car. And he said, here's your money. And he hands it to me. I said, I don't want to let Deb take it. So she takes the envelope. And he says, what will you count it in front of me? She looks at me and says, count it. So she counts it. Now I get hysterical. There's a lot of dopers around us. Here's an isolated road. And I'm looking up and down, and the police come along and they say, fine, you're sitting there counting how much. Oh boy, explain that one. So that was my story.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate it.
Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun.
LeMay, Curtis LeMay.
I met Kurt LeMay at a cocktail party that Mr. Yates gave, and I looked at him, and I thought I was looking in a mirror. And he looked at me, and I said, we look alike. And his wife says, Kurt's prettier than you are. And my wife says, well, I resent that remark. But one funny thing came out of it. He didn't want an actor to play him, so I said, okay. I'd never been on camera before in my life. And the night they set it up to shoot at night, I was making a picture, and that day I happened to have Trigger, a bear, and a little Mexican kid doing a fight or something. And I was supposed to finish at 6 o'clock, and at 8:30 I was still had Trigger, the bear, and the little kid. So we finally finished, and I went into makeup. Now I'm exhausted. They slapped some makeup on me. The wardrobe man put me in some things with all these things in, and I walked out of the studio. They'd made a picture just before that they were previewing that night to a lot of Army people, and 2 buses had just pulled up, and all these Army guys were coming out. Somebody yelled, "Tension!" Everybody snapped attention. I walked by, gave them a salute. And I walked in, and Alan Dwan said, "You're late." And I said, "I just had an escort, Alan."
Over the way we were clobbering the Empire, till General LeMay called his wing commanders to Guam.
I've been looking at these reconnaissance photos. The strikes aren't hitting the way they should. Maybe we're up there too high. 28,000 feet above an undercast. That's tough bombing. Looking at the photos, I don't see much low-altitude flak. Not like Germany. Why not bring the flights down? Compress them tighter, and we'll be sure of more accurate bombing. I've been waiting until we had enough strength. 3 full wings. Now we can hit them hard, at low altitudes. Say 6,000 feet at night and 12,000 in daylight, round the clock. To you, it might seem dangerous to go in at low altitude. I don't think it will be, and it's worth a chance. If it works, we'll shorten this war. And if we hit hard enough, maybe the ground forces won't have to land on those Japanese beaches under fire. That's what the B-29 was built to do. Burn the Jap military machine clear out of the war.